Good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, I'm very, very happy here, a lecture on Lamrim Chammo. The first day, the late Geshe Wangye's center, since many years, I think since my first visit to America, that was 73, 79, that's right, 79. Because I think, historical sort of link, very close link between Tibetan and Mongolian, and then particularly since third Dalai Lama, very unique close relations with Mongolia. So when we say Mongolian, including Kalmyk, Buryat, including all these Mongol type, so very unique sort of relation. Then also, my own case, they're one of the, I think, the best censure, Mutu Chongni, Mongolian. So he helped a lot. So he Mongolian. So something very close, sort of personally, some close sort of connection. Link. Then, one occasion, in late Wangye last, Wangye sort of center, one occasion, we reflect all these past sort of long stories. Everybody very much moved, isn't it? Everybody cry. I also very much touched. So the center, Joshua Samarbe, he not Tibetan, not Mongolian. The European American, but you two, I think, very faithfully carry the late Wanyala's spirit. So with that, they asked me the teaching of Lamrim Chammo, and they also translate Lamrim Chammo. So, and I, as a promise, in future, one occasion, I will going to teach Lamrim Chammo. So now today, materialized. But of course, this book, quite a thick book. Reading all this book within few days, impossible. So I'm going to explain because of that.
So I will proceed by my teaching on this text, primarily summarizing essential points, and where necessary, I may elaborate on these points.
Although the Lamrim Chammo Lamrim book, I think available, but I brought with me, is it this my own personal sort of Lamrim Chammo, because this text 17th March 1959, when I left Nobulinga that night, this book I brought with me. So, up to now, I think, I think 10, 15 times I give teaching of this Chomo. So, from Italy. This way. Chen 당분에 비싼 뜻이 되셔서 이제 보신 줄 말이야. So last, I think till now, I think at least around 15 times the teaching of Lama I gave. So all these teaching, you see, through this book. So this, I personally, is something very dear to me, like that. So as usual, when lecture on Buddhism gave, I always some kind of procedure. Firstly, the Pali Mangalam Sutra or any sutra, chanting, because that's the first, I think, the original Buddha Dharma. Then second, Sanskrit. There's since, I think, I think BC, the first century BC or second century BC, I think. Then Sanskrit eventually become the main language, particularly the Nalanda tradition. Main language is Sanskrit. So, Heart Sutra, they're going to recite in Sanskrit. One of my Indian Buddhist Bhikshu and great scholar. Then perhaps Chinese. So today these three languages. So.
The sutta that I will recite is called the Ratana Sutta. This is a hymn of praise to the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, and it's a way of invoking the blessings of the three jewels upon this Dharma assembly. The sutta is fairly long, but I will recite an abbreviated version of it. Yani da bhutani samagatani bhumani vayani vantalike sabeva bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi sakacha sunantu basitang tasmahi buddha nisameta sabe metang karota manusya pajaya divacaratocha haranti ye baling tasmahine rakata appamatta yang kin jivitang idava hurang va sage suvayang ratanang panitang nano samangati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu kayang viragang amatang panitang yada jagasakyamuni samahito natena dhammena samati kinchi idampi dhamme ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu yam buddha seto parivanai suching samadhi manantari kanyamahu samadhi natena samona vichati idampi dhamme ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu ye pugala atta satang pasatta chatari etani yugani honti te dakine ya sugatasa savaka ete sudinani mahapalani idampi sange ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu yesu piyuta manasa dalhena nikamino gotama sasanam hi te patipata amatang vigaya lada mudani buting bunjamana idampi sange ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu kinang puranang navang nati sambhavang virata chita ayati ke bhavasmin te kina bija avirulhi chandasa etena dinani mahapalani idampi sange ratanang panitang etena sacena suwati hotu yani dabutani samagatani pumani vayani vantalike tathagatang deva manusa pujitang buddhang namasama suwati hotu yani dabutani samagatani pumani vayani vantalike tathagatang deva manusa pujitang dhammang namasama suwati hotu yani dabutani samagatani pumani vayani vantalike tathagatang deva manusa pujitang sanghang namasama suwati hotu etena sacavajena soti te hotu sabada etena sachavajena sabarogo vinasatu, etena sachavajena potu te jayamangalang.
Thank you.
Om Haniro Dhammanutpadam Anuchedam Ashashvatam Anekarthamananarthamanagmamam Yaha Pradita Samutpadam Prapanchopashmang Shivam Deshyama Sambhustang Vande Vadatavarnam Pragya Paramita Hridaya Sutram Sankshipta Matrika Namah Sarvyayam Aryavrukdeshvara Bodhisattva Gambhirayam Pragya Paramitayam Charyam Charmano Vavlokati Sma Panskandaha Tashang Sabha Shunyan Pashyati Sma Eshariputra Rupam Shunata Shunatava Rupam Rupan Pradak Shunata Shunatayana Pradak Rupam Yadrupam Sa Shunataya Shunata Tadrupam Evamev Vedana Sangya Sanskara Vijnanani Yashariputra Sardharmaha Shunyata Lakshana Anutpanna Niruddha Amlana Vimlano Nana Paripurnaha Tasmachariputra Shunyatayang Narupam Na Vedana Na Sangyana Sanskara Na Vijnanani Na Chakshu Shrotragana Jiva Kaya Manaseng Na Rupa Shabda Gandha Sasprashava Dharmaha Na Chakshu Dhatu Yavan Mano Dhatu Na Vidya Na Vidya Na Vidyakshayo Na Vidyakshayo Yavan Jramanang Na Jramanang Chayo Na Dukha Samudana Rodha Marga Na Jnanang Na Praptivam Bodhisattvasya Pragya Paramidama Shruti Chittavarnaha Chittavarna Nastavatrasto Parasat Krantu Nishkanarvanaha Tradavasadaha Sabuddhaha Pragya Paramidama Shruti Nuttarang Samyak Sambodhya Visambudaha Tasma Jagyatavya Pragya Paramita Mahamantro Mahavidya Mantro Nuttara Mantro Sam Mantraha Sarvadik Prashamanaha Satyamitatvat Pragya Paramitaya Mukto Mantraha Tatatagade Gade Pargade Parsangade Bodhi Swaha Tatatagade Gade Pargade Parsangade Bodhi Swaha Tatatagade Gade Pargade Parsangade Bodhi Swaha Iti Pragya Paramita Hridaya Sutrang Samaptam Pragya Paramitam Bodho Shubratna Kare Swam Sarva Paramitastattra Tadatmanam Vasataha Nishprapancha Nirabhasha Nirvikalpa Niralayaha Nisvava Parak Sushma Bindunad Vivarjita Pragya Paramita Mata Sarbuddhodaya Para Trayanuplabdhi Rupa Sarvagyan Gochara Niralamba Pade Pragya Niralamba Mahakripa Eki Bhutaha Dheya Sadharm Gagne Gaganam Yatha.
Thank you.
皆无明，亦无明劫，乃至老死亦无老死尽，无苦集灭，道无智亦无得，亦无所得，故菩提萨埵依般若波罗蜜多，故心无怪，无怪故有恐怖，远离颠倒梦想，究竟涅槃，三世诸佛依般若波罗蜜多，故得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提，故知般若波罗蜜多是大神咒，是大明咒，是无上咒，是无等等咒，能除一切苦，真实不虚故说般若波罗蜜多咒，即受咒曰揭谛揭谛，波罗揭谛，波罗僧揭谛，菩提萨婆
마섬 주미 시라 파르신 마예메가 나게고 소소라리 이시주바 조소제 용가 차선고 대하다 가데 파랑가데 파라 상가데 보디소 대하다 가데 파랑가데 파라 상가데 보디소 대하다 가데 파랑가데 파라 상가데 보디소 년도学我做到更新年节年节的干业大 Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lecture on Buddhism, one particular text, the Lamrim, which is wrote by Lama Tsongkhapa, great scholar and a real holder of Nalanda tradition. I think one of the top scholar, Tibetan scholar. I think most of you, I think, already familiar. I think my commitment or my view or my thought. Perhaps some may be new, so I want to mention briefly about my basic positive views or commitment. The number one, I am just one human being among 6 billion human beings. I am just one of them. I think beside our prayers and these things, in reality, we all 6 billion human beings share one planet. We all survive under one sun. Then particularly today's reality, because of the population and also, I think, the easier communication, these things, and also the modern economy, global economy, that environment issue. Because of this new factor, actually we simply become one community, one entity. So, according to that reality, there is no separate, independent, individual interest. Each of us' future entirely depends on the rest of the humanity, rest of the world. So in ancient time, each nation or each community more or less, live independently. So, since usual concept or view, still that old Sarvasya
pattern, old pattern, old pattern of thinking,
old thinking, still remain there. So the gap, the reality and our perception, that gap there, sometimes increasing. So because of that, our old thinking, old way of viewing, it is actually with that view, our action then become unrealistic. Because where our view, just, I think, the old sort of thinking. So that's why I think although it's nobody want more problem, therefore nobody want to create more problem. But problem there, a lot of man-made problem there, because we are lacking that holistic, realistic view. So in order to develop sense of global responsibility, look, entire planet is just one small planet, and individual future entirely depend on that. So we have to take care. That's the best way to safeguard individual future, isn't it? Like that. So there we need the sense of sort of concern of well-being of rest of the people, rest of the sentient being, or rest of the world. So that's my number one commitment. Make clear that we need more wider view and sense of global responsibility. That's my number one commitment. So I feel the Buddhist teaching not take as a religion, but simply some ideas to think entire sentient being is useful. Maybe because of the unrealistic, thinking about others, concern about other spaces, other space, too far. Looks is in not much sort of sense, but emotionally it's very useful. So when we're thinking about the infinite sort of planet, infinite sentient being, then the 6 billion human beings on this planet, there's no question. And billions of animals, oh really, I think suffer immense under human hand, isn't it? So the Buddhist message of infinite altruism is something very relevant. Not talking about next life, or not talking about Buddhahood, but simply in order to be happier person, something sensible person, something useful person in this planet. I think these, the message or teaching of infinite altruism is something very useful. And also in day-to-day life, whenever we're facing some difficulties, some of these ideas really helpful to equip our mind, or particularly our emotion, so that when we're passing through difficulties, still we can maintain peace of mind. So that also is very, very good for health. Too much worry, too much subversity, ambition, too much ambition, then bound to increase suspicion, jealousy, these things. Result, more unrest. Right? So some of these sort of thought, these sort of the idea is very, very useful for well-being one individual, mentally, emotionally, and through that way, physically also, like that. Then second commitment, so therefore, to non-believer who have no interest about religion, okay, listen some of these ideas. If you feel something useful, then take it. If you feel nonsense, then forget, no problem. Then second, my commitment is the promotion of religious harmony. I'm Buddhist. Sometimes I describe as a staunch Buddhist. Because you see, those ancient Buddhist masters, particularly Nalanda master, their mind is very, very critical, including Buddha's own word. So there are critical analyzation about non-Buddhist traditions, their views, and the second
These masters are very erudite and very critical. They're able to find wherever there might be cracks in the non-Buddhist positions.
So all these masters, including Nagarjuna, Aryandava, Digna, Dhammakirti, and Shantarakshita, these really very, very sharp mind and great logician, and they make clear all the weakness of this different sort of traditions within Buddhist tradition. So my mind also some way, at least in little way, some equipped that way to investigate, to analyze. So from that viewpoint, I can say I'm one staunch Buddhist. However, I also accept the value or potential of all these major traditions. There's positive side. The negative side, conflict, division in the name of religion, so bad, so sad. Some innocent, genuine, faithful people sometimes suffer. So therefore, the effort, promotion of religious sort of harmony with mutual respect, mutual understanding is very, very essential. So, in order to develop close understanding to those non-Buddhist, useful to learn about the Buddhist sort of structure like that. So in fact, yesterday I have one pilgrimage to Ajmer in Rajasthan, a famous Muslim holy place. Mainly, I think, a Sufi center, or the most, I think, holy place according to Sufism. From there yesterday, at the very early morning, I think 5 days or 1 week was their annual sort of religious sort of prayer. So whole night they carry. So they invited me. So I prefer participate in morning. So yesterday from 3:30 up to 4:30, I participated at prayer with Muslim hat. Buddhist monk's robe and Muslim hat. So they are very, very hot and very humid and too much crowd. So still, my robe, some smell. Of course, the Indian public, I think 100,000, several hundred thousands people, you see, very, very crowded. And of course, Kasota,
in a very close proximity to each other.
So some 수중우치마, 그래서 같이 수중우치부터 가지게 돼.
So maybe we can call it the scent of sound ethical discipline, a Muslim ethical discipline.
Plus minatma.
And mixed with, of course, sweat.
So I really enjoyed that meeting. Very good. So actually, I think a few weeks ago, again, one international Muslim conference took place in Delhi. They invited me, so I think I was only the non-Muslim, the participation in that conference. And afternoon, again I visited Delhi Tikasa.
Tomb of
the mosque in Delhi, the ancient one.
Jama Masjid. Jama Masjid.
Oh, Jama Masjid.
Jama Masjid.
So I went there, pray together with Muslims, thousands of Muslims. So this is the first time we should wear the Muslim white hat. So I little doubt. My personally is very much sort of happy. But a little hesitant because some hardliner Hindus may feel a little the different way, I thought. But later, the response from the Hindu community also excellent, very good. So it seems to see people appreciate my effort to promote religious harmony and genuine respect. So if you really like that kind of effort, then please practice by yourself. Make closer
contacts
with other tradition, with follow of other tradition, and particularly Muslim brothers, sisters, I think very, very important. Since the September 11th event, sometimes some negative sort of impression. So that's totally wrong. Good. Of course, from Buddhist viewpoint, I think in the past, in past history, I think many Indian Buddhists suffer a lot under Muslim hand. Past is past. No use is it to think these lines and then keep hatred. Absolutely foolish. Past is past. Now today, for example, those Muslims in Buddha Gaya area, I think their ancestor came to Buddha Gaya in order to destroy Buddhist temple there. But now today, they are best friend of Buddhist pilgrims. Like that. Whenever I visit Buddha Gaya, they always invite me. They provide me, because they give me tea and some very delicious nuts. I always enjoy. So like that. That's now today's reality. In any way, around 1,000 millions of Muslims, they are very important. Those genuine Muslim practitioners, a wonderful person, like that. Okay. So now, now they lecture on Buddha Dharma. Firstly, 용자 다 좀 된 런이 동갑게
So, according to the conventional understanding of history, Buddha came to the world almost 2,600 years ago.
So, eventually, I think Buddha Dharma then spread from India and different countries, and many Southeast Asia and East Asia, like that. So today, like Burma, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and these areas, mainly Pali tradition. Then China and Korea, Japan, Vietnam, I think mainly, and then also Tibet and Mongolia, and of course Pali tradition also there. On top of that, Sanskrit tradition. So it seems, I think, Sanskrit tradition, I think a major foreign language, then Sanskrit, then the rest. I think foreign language. I think first, most important, Chinese language. Then second, I think Tibetan language. So Buddhism flourished in China, I think at least 3-4 centuries earlier than in Tibet. So I always consider that firstly, the Pali tradition are senior most. There's a foundation of Buddha Dharma. The holder of Pali tradition, there are eldermost student of Buddha. Then Chinese, in Sanskrit tradition, the Chinese Buddhist senior most sort of Buddhist student. Then we Tibetan and Mongolian. So wherever I give teaching to the Chinese community, I always, at the beginning, express my salutation because they are elder student of Buddha. Meantime, I also mention half teaching. As far as knowledge is concerned, junior student sometimes better. I think because Tibetan Buddhism, established by Shantarakshita. Shantarakshita, one of the topmost logician and philosopher of Nalanda institution. So he personally came to Tibet. And then Kamalashila, is I think one important his student, Kamalashila, is both great scholar. You can see, they are writing, still available. Oh, great logician and philosopher, Madhyamaka philosopher. So naturally, the teacher himself, monk, top scholar, logician. So you see, he want his student should be that way, isn't it? I think up to now, the 21st century, I think the rigorous study, all these important texts, at first learn by heart, then word by word explanation, and not only just explanation, but through a thorough sort of debate. So precise, precision, through debate. So all, I think, Tibetan, generally, I think Tibetan sort of knowledge about Buddha Dharma, nothing special, but because of these sort of the great teacher, I think a real holder of Nalanda tradition, I think more complete form or more depth way, I think Tibetan tradition is the best. So then there is differences. Those texts or those Indian masters' text and the Tibetan masters' text, there's differences, different style, because of the different circumstances. In India, not only Buddhist, but also non-Buddhist, and a lot of discussions among top scholars of these different traditions there. So the writing by like Nagarjuna or Aryadeva, all these more comparative.
A comparative in their perspective.
More sort of analyze.
There's more detailed, deeper analysis as well. Yeah.
Then Tibetan masters sort of text, generally, the circumstances is such, only Buddhist. So therefore, I think the audience, I think take for granted they are Buddhist. Not much emphasis, comparison, like that. So this book, this text, of course, wrote by Kasatadire, Atisha Dibamkara on Bengali, century Kudure. 11th century, he came to Tibet. Shandar Rishida, 8th century. In 11th century, Dibamkara came to Tibet. Then I think they basically the Nalanda tradition already established well. So the Atisha Dibamkara then wrote a small text that is the Laling Kriskabuyim.
So Atisha composed this short text since the Nalanda tradition was already well established, and the aim of the text is provide a kind of a method on how to integrate the knowledge of the various Buddhist teachings into the context, in the context of a practitioner of different levels of mental capacities.
So
this text, known as Bodhipada Paradipa, or lamp for the path to enlightenment, became the root of all the Lamrim text, stages of the path text.
So this Lamrim Chamon is actually
So in that sense, one can treat this Tsongkhapa's text, the Great Treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, as a kind of an extensive commentary or exposition of that short text of Atisha. Do any of you have the text itself?
Thick book?
The thick book, yeah.
Yes. Have you understood that?
So can you raise your
No.
hands? Do
Yes, sir.
Do
두 개.
가로.
전 됩시. 야, 다 고제 온래. 내 럼리 신문 수서디 기 장주 그린의 직시래. 아니 링음 그린의 직시야래.
The transmission of this Lamrim Chemo teachings I received once from Gyabje Tishan Rinpoche and another one from Gyabje Ling Rinpoche, my two tutors.
The lineage of Tishan Rinpoche, Tishan Rinpoche from Tuji Pawang Rinpoche, that way. And the Ling Rinpoche is because of the lineage. Pawang is also there, but one because of the main lineage from Tibetan Dalai Lama. So Tibetan Dalai Lama give teaching of Lamrim Chemo and Noblinga, and the Ling Rinpoche then quite young, but he received teaching from Tibetan Dalai Lama. So now, 땅을 고대 나무 구르면서 고가야스 렉자게 매버리 다 렉자게 매야디 영어도 되다 Sanskrit tradition 인데 왔다 디페지 중요하래 간다 날렌데 개바 디디 조 lecture 다 지명도와 사진이 있잖아요. 아주 별이야. 아니 lecture 고대 뭐야지. 추 야간이 용벌이 사다디 땡겨.
The text opens with a salutation to Manjushri in Sanskrit language, and this is partly to indicate the source of the Tibetan tradition is the Sanskrit tradition, and Sanskrit became, as explained before, the dominant language, the medium through which Buddha Dharma was presented in the Nalanda tradition. Therefore, in Tibet, the custom evolved to acknowledge that source, and often at the beginning of a Tibetan text, there would be a salutation in Sanskrit.
다전에 솔로가 당구디 담아 좀 된다래야 최신자래. 다 최신자다한데 표적을 제외 준비고 사티기 아니 두 무슨 소백권에 꿀었대 봐스. 딘나가 쳐버리셔. 두 무슨 소백권에 꿀었대 봐 사티기 지시십에 고반테야 아니 두 매바 말 지시십에 고반테야 두젠레스 두진을 되는 중요해스. 자, 다 두진 그래서라나 아니 초 타야버스 아니 사베번에 아니 가서 단 주대버시 실전에 분석을 제외 좀 고스 제니 안다 로빈 초제 랑부 아니 사먹군도 쳐줄이야 디지셔버 세매기부터 교도 깨는 때문에 중어를 세하게 교도 깨는 때문에 중어 인지 딱벌은 중기 기부 말이스 전에 더 뒤코야 된다라 줄바 세송도와 남자자 나로 대만 저 교인이 전에 친구도 친구도 가서 줄분이 송세도 것 가서 가 말해 줄분이 송세딩 것 가서 들어딘 거지 대야 것 잘못다 딱한다디 딱배 기부 멤버십 주비하게 된다라 둘러서 숨버리스 쳐다도 숨어와 가 그래서 넘기 누구야 누구네들 그래서 가 정말 아주 치코를 커두지 딘 거지 참아다고 님이 뒤에 말해 참아다고 님이 말해 everybody fail To recall that sentence.
So the
Of
first,
course, understandable. All scholars are now quite old. So gradually forgetting.
So the first verse of salutation is salutation to the Buddha, and here the way in which Tsongkhapa pays homage to the Buddha is by reflecting upon the qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind. And in the first line, he reflects upon the qualities of the Buddha's body, and here he identifies a causation, the fact that the Buddha's physical body or Buddha's form body came into being as a result of its causes.
What did that is? Oh, now he contributed now. Has a contribution, very good contribution.
So here in this first line, Tsongkhapa identifies explicitly that the Buddha's form body is a result of specific causes. And here the causes are identified as accumulation of all the qualities of goodness. And he, in other words, referring to the meritorious deeds. And by identifying, by correlating this cause and the result, which is the Buddha's form body, Tsongkhapa is making a very important point here. The point is that even the attainment of the Buddha's Buddhahood is a function of causation, function of causes and conditions. The Buddhahood does not come out of nowhere, nor is it an eternal permanent state which is uncaused. And here, in a sense, Tsongkhapa is also kind of invoking a similar point made by Dignaga in the opening stanza of his Pramana Samuchaya, Compendium of Valid Cognition, where in identifying Buddha as a valid person or a valid being, Dignaga makes the point that he has become a valid being. And this term become, having become, is a very important point. And when commenting upon that, Dharmakirti says that in order to negate the idea that the Buddha was uncaused, Dignaga explicitly mentions the term becoming. The point Dharmakirti is making is that the fact that Dignaga, when referring to the Buddha as having become a valid being, is indicating that Buddha, through some processes, came to be a valid being.
No, yeah. Tadi gyuzo tayewe druwa saya tadi gyuzo changadi Persian yorla ta zawa the gobulujugi register yore.
So here Tsongkhapa speaks about how the Buddha's body came into being from myriads of causes, and these are of course listed in various texts, particularly in the Perfection of Wisdom Studies text, but also they are explicitly mentioned in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland as well.
Oh, that digi Satindi Induzane Tamba Ni Yang Loba Lamji Nego Mondo Song Devici. Tindi Induzane Tamba Ni Tamebe Negoji Mola Chinshe Kanda Kansa Tamebachi Naranzo Jawa Rangda Rangda Tamebe Gibuchi Rimgi da Kasori Pigi Juso Manguchi Dumbe Tane any Shendu Sugu Sad Taware Stati Sungyari.
So in brief, what Tsongkhapa is explaining is that even the Buddha, whom we revere, the Blessed Buddha, was previously a sentient being who was on the path to becoming a Buddha. Therefore, at one point, the Buddha too was like ourselves, an ordinary person who, as a result of having accumulated and gathered all the relevant conditions, eventually evolved into a fully enlightened being.
Tadine 다 가서래 분석결이 아니 저 준비 고사 책디 나 고아야고 차려야 대신 남샤디 시고도.
So, to fully understand the significance of this first line, that the Buddha's body is born of myriads of excellent causes, one needs to also understand the relationship between the four noble truths as well, the presentation of the four noble truths.
다 대신 남샤 지침be 시발라 대니가 남샤 시거든.
And in order to fully
가져다 대니 모직을 너가 타대도 다 너가 타대 전에 또 대니와 치아져 봐. 된적이 대니가 남샤한테 시어봐야 돼.
So in order to again fully understand the meaning of the presentation of the four noble truths, one needs to develop an understanding of the teachings on the two truths, particularly in the manner in which one understands the true truth as belonging, sharing the same nature but having distinct identities. So that kind of understanding of two truths becomes important. So these explanations will be given in the context of the practices pertaining to the person of middling capacity.
타연저의 라고는 송세야 디기 아니 오늘 다한테 부족을 제가 좀 고세야 디기 페이지 디 페이지 다 태용도 거든요. 균제된 좀 세야 돼.
So one of the important principles that is implicit in this line relating to the explanation of the Buddha's qualities as having born out of these myriads of excellent causes is the principle of dependent origination in terms of cause and effects.
다전에 타연저의 라고는 송세야 디기 roe rawa neguk 다 가서 우리 그게 neguk 대화당 터두고 대화 니체 단 된데비 neguk 대화 있는다 터두고 대화 있는다 디디 라랑기 튠비 주디잖아 되네 용부야리 개진세 튠진 주베타네 neguk 대화도 터두고 대화지 누구야리 진정인 배 인도산에 내가도 더더욱이 되든 주베 탑 치신 시고야래 내가도 더더욱은 되든 주베 탑 시발라 숨그 칠레고 관에 연구야래 진정인 인도산에 가서 타연저의 라고 송신송샤.
So in identifying the qualities of the Buddha's enlightened speech, Tsongkhapa writes that your speech fulfills the hopes and aspirations of countless sentient beings, limitless sentient beings. So when we talk about fulfilling the wishes or hopes of countless sentient beings, we are here referring to the welfare of sentient beings. So when we speak about bringing about the welfare of sentient beings, there are immediate temporary welfare and a long-term, ultimate welfare. So in both of these cases, in order to, for an enlightened Buddha to be able to fulfill these, bring about this welfare, the Buddha needs to have a deeper understanding of what these needs are and in what way the Buddha can bring about these welfares in the most effective manner. And here, the primary medium through which the Buddha's enlightened activity engages is through the medium of speech. Therefore, the Buddha's speech, enlightened quality of the Buddha's speech is its capacity to fulfill the aspirations of the sentient beings.
춘주 넘버 숨사지 뭐가 전에 숨고도와 버진 안에 요래 전에 어디 춘주 넘버 숨나로 가래 구주리 춘주 또 근주의 춘주 아니 숨제된지 춘주 숨 샤가 난게 춘주 조디 숨제된 춘주 사린 바래.
So in some texts we also find references to the Buddha's qualities in terms of their miraculous nature and in the kind of the magical quality of the Buddha's body, speech and mind. And with relation to the body, often miraculous powers of the Buddha's physical body are identified, and the Buddha's magical quality of the Buddha's mind is identified as a mind that is able to realize all facts, and then the magical quality of the speech is a speech that is able to provide the instructions that are relevant to all beings. So of these three magical qualities of the Buddha, always the speech, qualities of the speech are considered to be the most important.
No. Then, that diggy, the sung chile, sad diggy, Germuchigi, Zavakun, Sungani, Zavachoi, Tan, Dini, Cheneta, Denjun Tomosoyati. Tagi di, Dunja Denjun she. Da, the sung chile, the soul di, Denjun Tomo. The Denjung Tekonani, Pajasuyati Zore.
So therefore, when we are talking about the quality, enlightenment quality of the Buddha's speech, we are talking about this quality of the Buddha's speech to ability to fulfill all the wishes, aspirations of the sentient beings. And here, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote in praise of the Buddha for teaching dependent origination. He says that among all your enlightened activities, the most important one is your activity of speech. And within that, the speech teaching dependent origination is the most important. So in other words, what Tsongkhapa is explaining is that with relation to understanding the enlightenment qualities of the Buddha's speech, one needs to understand that among all the speeches of the Buddha, those that pertain to teachings on dependent origination in terms of emptiness, dependent origination in terms of ultimate reality, those teachings are the most important.
Yeah. 대양 자오 고물을 주고 따와 송쇼도가 배나 관계 계단 지고다 순리인의 방법에 땡진 저번 중에서 동안들을 자처로 쓰네. 다 땡지 참을 쓴 거래. 저나 동안 고물을 주고 동안 그 따와 쓰는 데잖아요. 망세 땡중 그때 권한이 송을 준비시 되용도.
We also notice that in Nagarjuna's own writing, often when he makes salutations to the Buddha and pays homage to the Buddha, he does so by recognizing particularly the Buddha having taught the teachings of dependent origination.
다되네. 제가서 주부수 소백원은 꿀었다 봐. 저부수 소백원은 숭었다 봐. 러스네. 저부수 소백원은 숭었다 봐.
So
주대 꾸지 주베 다 첼레삼. 다 딘데부르디 에네 숭나바 참제바. 어다 디요야티. 디 두제저 공시하지. 다 디숨버디 가서 멀리 시시 시시스게 톡 세야되기 강단 양단 대비 돈은 나버근데 나서 디숨바스. 소원은 신체 지지 진이기 다 다바다 가서 균제기 땡중다 때네 딱왜 땡중기 추례 잠배 애니 추주 진입을 써야 되디 가서 그랬다 영야가 자와디 아니 지지 진이기 추근 멀리 왔다 킨시 식베 다 캠바 가서 캠베기지 찌기 지드신이기 때문에 시제추 멀르바 켄지 식베 투기한데 다 딩하고 그래서 전에다 멀리시 시스베 툭사 딩 모표수 서버 뭘 잡아 툭을 때봤어요.
So what we see here is that when identifying the qualities of the Buddha's body, Tsongkhapa is looking at it primarily from the perspective of the causes that gave rise to the Buddha's form body. And when identifying the qualities of the Buddha's speech, he does so by primarily from the perspective of speech as the fruition or the result of and then in the third one, when identifying the quality of Buddha's mind, he identifies the nature of the qualities of the Buddha's mind, enlightened mind, as having the capacity to, while within a single instance, having fully immersed in the realization of ultimate truth, but at the same time perceiving the world of diversity as well. And it is, so this enlightened mind of the Buddha really is the actual identity of the Buddhahood itself. So therefore, when praising to the Buddha's mind, the perspective is from the nature of the Buddhahood itself.
Yeah. 다 샤게 조달은 거자세 샤게 rik 아니 rik 샤게 rik 쟁기 아니 거니 조 아니 다 마와 담에 버샤네 야오도와 마와 담에 담바철 차차스.
So with these, then Tsongkhapa makes homage to the Buddha, saying that I bow to you, I pay homage to you with my head bowed, the principal among the Shakya clan. So this is the Buddha, Shakyamuni was a member of the Shakya clan.
Yeah. That dharma in the lamoche. Dharma that in be chamjani chabachabada. And Ludu Tomini chabachabada. And Casado Chochi, Tajin the Ungara chabachaba. Any Ginzi Chimono chabachaba. Or the Tangni, the Shude theory. Then they never go said the young Nagachuburisha. No.
And then in the subsequent...
Tingdu Nanjo Jono, Tabanyum, Mangdu Yamne Nala, Vacation, Paji Sunrutala, Choremi, Lundu Jibian Jibe, Tumebe, Dambanano, Zoga, Dambacho, Kavakeva, Lambda, Tatone, Shingdashim, Lundu Shavala, Dagi in Gundajoan, you said, that's 60, Nursing Shadwa. That Tazy Tetu and the Perkangelia. Tingdu Nanjo Jono, Tabanyum, Sen, that Chen Yamin Shendu, Yedava Jig, Yedava, Jigla, Ea Jig, Kang Yamin Sheagi. Da Kasure, Namra Sorbe, Kanda Saba the Dachi, Sweetie de Lea, that Namra Mongushi, Dachi was usually and the Love Johnson and Shango Mato, Love Masaba, young Marmata. 자, 드니 이르사네. 다 난조로 전에 지금 그게 냠린 천주그 변 너무 첨부천이 여등에 저 리지 아니 타베 다시 보면 알았지. 근데 그 타네. 냠린 지금다 내가로 증인이 마도 다시 보디 용도면도 쓰와. 등주 난조 좀 타바요. 망토 냠린 나라 미케션스. 다 타바 다시 붙여네. 그 슝진 근데 부딩에 참배 슝지 주스 참배 슝망고로 타바잖아요. 뭐 작을게 되네 쭉 조수 봐봐도 친지 치마시 태면집에 이나야 쌤뭐 되어야지. 안도 놈니 시절이 나게게 가서 우리 그게 샴델로 돼 서로 차도가 샴델로 돼 서로 딘데기 때문에 차단기 줄로 대해서 차등해지 유구여가 인도산에 망투냠 딘데기 다 경여 딘데기 때문에 이나야 지 그게 냠년셔야지 상으로 코인도산에 지 로좀 시접지도 파 토로 대가 소리시 마도 수 또알 리마신 버시 인도산에 아니 야 견식이 뭐야래 딘데기 인도산에 딱들이 망도 젊치기 망도 퇴자 최기 풍반이 손으로 담바를 샤워 내외 농시잖아요. 아주 기시 배시하고 유행해. 근데 양식 유튜브 스케메르체 나 드림레다 여자 저태디 다 저기 철 대바 말도 말이디 이내 다 지고 또 알은지 애니 즉 상무동 마신 봐. 가동 공모서 송주를 입었는지 대진낭도다 처음 마신 거지. 드리기 타네. 따고 견인 거야. 드리인데 망퇴 냠내나를 미케시스. 폐지 수로 따라 처리미스. 지금 폐처와 도처기 롬니 되게 지금이나 그냥 도처 장장을 서로. 대례지 참매숑 롬니 입으시면 참매숑 장장을 서로. 양도지 양식 뇌숑 원배숑 서로 장장으로 근데 타는 거 되게 당 근데 차이스 폐지 송으로 따라 처리미지 차이도 대달 처리미지도 송댕에 디즈니 디가 다 되게 다 송하는 신기 타지도 두벌 쩨베이네야 아니 롬니 메다와 지 롬니 전부 제베이네 냠니 또디 마셔봐 아니 폐지 송으로 따라 처리미지도 교대버디 이리 개발 개발람 담바 용서 냠니 치트야 이거 말이지 근데 인도 개발 개발람다 대통네 다 윤전 대달라 때네 개발 개발람다 차와 통네 다 개발 개발람 차상라 용서봐 근데지 아니 슝디 조조를 하진 디범가는 자셔게 람정기만 리버티긴 되잖아요 아니 뭐만어 장만어 구림만어 용되기도 진짜인데 상라 만어 지금 연구하래스 진짜인데 아니 람정기다 대바 장군이스 개발기는 제로는 신대심도 룸 신대심고 루루도 도민이지 가스 찍도만 대땡에게 대베 타라 아니 단도 찍도 기부승을 넘는 되네 냠는 치루 아니 조지가도 송셔다 디 아니 마shum지 좀 야데 아니 점수가 투기어도 스송이 말이
So in the subsequent stanzas of salutation, Tsongkhapa makes salutations to Manjushri and Maitreya. He then also makes salutations to Nagarjuna and Asanga, the two principal revitalizers of Mahayana tradition. And then he also makes salutations to Atisha Dipamkara, Shirjana, the kind of founder of this Lamrim lineage. And then subsequently also to the great masters who are upholders of this lineage. And then having made these salutations, then Tsongkhapa explains in verse the primary motivation behind his composition of Lamrim Chemo, this great treatise. And here, the points he is making are quite important. For example, he says that these days, those who are very dedicated in their yogic practices, meditative practices, they are lacking in learning. So there might be a lot of practitioners who are very dedicated to their own practices, but they tend to select only one or two aspects of a particular practice, and then they are lacking in a greater understanding of the overall Buddhist path, and therefore they are not able to really implement into their practice an integrated approach that would encompass all the key elements of the essential teachings. Similarly, he says that those who are learned, those who have great learning, somehow many of them seem to be not very skilled in bringing them together and integrating them and putting them into the context of a personal practice. In some cases, though someone may be highly learned in the text, they may have studied all the 5 great treatises or 5 great topics or 13 great texts and so on. But on the personal level, they do not seem to have had actually experienced much effect from their Dharma learning. In some cases, in fact, the learning may serve as a further reinforcement of their own ego and conceitedness and jealousy, envy, and so on. In some cases, even though these negative qualities may not be pronounced in these masters, but somehow, when it comes to actually implementing what they know into practice, somehow they seem to, feel lost, at a loss, where they see all of this vast area of teachings, and then somehow all these teachings seem to be scattered, and the people, these learned masters are not able to somehow find a way of bringing them together in an integrated format, which is relevant within the context of a practitioner. So that's what Tsongkhapa is talking about. And then he says that, and also many individuals, when it comes to their study and practice, they seem to be partial. So for example, he's talking about the particular period in Tibet, so where if someone happens to be keen in the practice of the sutra path, then they tend to ignore the Vajrayana teachings. If someone happens to be a practitioner of Vajrayana, they tend to ignore the sutra aspects of the teaching. If someone is enthusiastic about pramana studies, epistemological studies, then they somehow seem to specialize just on that. Some may be on Abhidhamma, some Vinaya, but they keep their own understanding and practice partial, so that it's not complete. And in such cases, Tsongkhapa is saying that in all of these 3 instances, yogic practitioners who have no learning, masters with great learning but unable to put them into a context of a practice, and those who are one-sided in their understanding, in all of these cases, they are not capable of engaging in the practice of the Dharma that would truly please the wise ones. And by here, what he is saying is that they are not able to engage in a path where they can have this integrated approach which will bring in all the essential elements of the Buddhist path and undertake that practice. And here Tsongkhapa is saying that what Atisha has provided in his lamp for the path to enlightenment, a way to integrate all of these elements of the Buddha's teaching in the context of a single practitioner and in the context of one person sitting on one seat and bringing all of these elements into the context relevant to a single practitioner. Therefore, Tsongkhapa says that he, in writing this extensive exposition of Atisha's text, which will provide a path that would please the great wise ones, his heart takes great delight.
So that the Aryan Deve Shipkebe Nania, Sonam member Tamburdo, Pardudan and Doberche, Tamatashi Gundova, Tishitin, Karayi, Sundati, Sunundua, Tandajibush.
So, what Tsongkhapa is explaining here is also very similar to what Aryadeva says in the 400 stanzas, where Aryadeva presents a kind of a stages. For example, where he says that on the first level, one must avert all the demeritorious activities. In the middle, one must cease grasping to self, and finally, on the final stage, one must cease grasping at all views. And he who understands such kind of approach is truly wise.
That is good day. None day number go said. Kanda Chongzu member Majula. Lenin Jibe, Loy to dancing. Taiwan dance on Tanda, Chen Debe, Gandeta, Ziji Dundians. So that is Ship Givenala, 순회 로된 되냐와 내분은 샤샤샤 되샤.
So then in the final stanza, Tsongkhapa calls upon the potential readers who may benefit from this and asking them to listen to what he has to say. And he says that those whose minds are not obscured by darkness of biased thinking, and those who have the capacity of a mind that is able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, and those who wish to make their human existence of leisure and opportunity meaningful, those fortunate ones, please listen to what I have to say with single-pointed mind. So again here, this is very similar to what Aryadeva says in his 400 stanzas, where he identifies the qualities that are necessary on the part of a listener, where he says that the practitioner of Dharma who's listening to the Dharma teaching should be objective, should be endowed with critical intelligence, and should have an interest in what he or she is learning. So these are the three qualities that are identified.
Yeah. The
text then follows with a story of Atisha in the context of explaining the greatness of the author, which we are not going to read.
Yeah. That day, Zavabichawa mixes Shaskimindo. Takanda Ludu Yapsenama Gube, Dave Namsha, Dinjung Takonani, Namsha. And Chambang Gombo, the Tominama Gube, and the Gubber Zivina, and Jodi. Sada Paru Simba. That is our day, Chamji Chanjusam. That Turkicha. Other deity, Gunzi the Gushe. And Churchill deity, Nigalo, Kasurta, Gubitman, Du. And on Churchene, Gadam Shungchu, the Jami. Gesuni, Sajeni, Labjuni, Gesum Tabation, and Labju Jabation, that's Jusembe Java. That's Jusembe Java Susane, Jupe Java, and Cargo, Druve Java, Truve Javina, Chaneta, Java Sunaloda, Chanjusembe. Shumbutanda Yonzola, the Tangu, the Indu, Labji Jevation, Sida in the Mendo. Then, Sagan, the Dingsitions, Sundua. Mish Dodi and the Dingsigo the Remendo, then Dodi the new Kung the Shacho Mendo Day, shows the Gachabo the Wata, taking the Salam Dandi, Dodi and the Chancellor with the Shusha. Sagan. So the deity got on Shun Trutane, Soyadi, got on Shumba. Then she did sort of the Negatana, Sonshaya, got on Lemba. And she Shun Chu the Negatana, Sonshaya, and got on Mangaba. She got on Gusum Cheto Simari. That got on Gusum with the Sumjala, Jermuchi, Gibasungat Sen. Shenta Germans Rangeta, she purging the Namshe, sending any Uma, Umeshun, Nayore, Santo Chijuni, Zenju Namsheni, Tangil Sheningu, that thing over the German Chigi, Umetawa Bogda, subsheti that in Ayore. 디디 가서 다 땡. 디디기 시루 샤베타네 말름을 막 공백이나 너는 슈버 차래. 너는 셔모디 배지 잡든 버진 슝디리 예베타네 배지지. 나는 남시 닝게 날이야. 계속으로치기. 남시 닝게 날이야. 버진 막 샤버만 뛰어들잖아요. 야. 너는 봐. 가서 그래. 가서 그게 샤바는 것도 와. 아주 늦으셔. 난디 너는 슈버였지 않더래. 다 슝첨어디도 맞을 세제. 너는 시중 장장을 터는 막 TV에는 너는 몇 가서 너는 봐. 다 완전 샤바트지. 오늘 샤바트지 냠는데 70번 신들어 나. 종준이와 뒤바래요. 그도 차오세는 수요 공부랑네. 아니 진주가 뜻이야. 지금은 다 티 게드다 망고야래. 다티 가서 다티 순순도 되다 망고야래. 남주 치진게 소야라고 다들 다 슝충이. 다 저리가 하는 거 티야로. 엔디리 너무 망하고 쳐들으셔. 망하고 있거든.
So in terms of the author of this text, of course, it traces to the Indian master Atisha, and Atisha in turn traces the lineage that he has received back to two primary lineages, one stemming from Nagarjuna and primarily pertaining to the Buddha's teaching on the philosophical view of emptiness, particularly the teaching on dependent origination in terms of ultimate reality. So that lineage of instructions come through Nagarjuna and successive masters, that transmission which Atisha received. And then another principal strand of teachings stem from Maitreya's lineage, Maitreya through to Asanga and successive masters, where the primary focus really has been on the method aspect of the Mahayana path, particularly those practices that deal with the cultivation of loving kindness, compassion, and awakening mind, bodhicitta. So in Atisha, these two lineages really merged into Atisha, and Atisha being the author of the root text of Lamrim Chemo, and from Atisha, historically in Tibet, three principal lineages of Atisha's teaching evolved. These are referred to as the lineage of Great Treatises, which stem from Potowa. And here, the way in which they understood Atisha's instruction was on the basis of the study and practice of six principal texts, Indian texts. The first two being the Jataka tales, the Buddha's previous life stories, and collection of aphorisms, Udana Varga. And these two texts are seen as texts primarily related to cultivation of...
So the
Udana Varga, this collection of aphorisms, probably was originally a Pali text. And these two texts really forms the basis for enhancement and cultivation of devotion and faith in the Buddha. And the two second texts are Asanga's Bodhisattva Bhumi, levels of the Bodhisattva, and Maitreya's ornament of Mahayana treatises or Mahayana sutras. And these two texts are primarily viewed in terms of teachings on the meditative states, the samadhis. And they deal extensively with the various levels and parts of the Mahayana path. And then the third two texts are Shantideva's Shiksha Samuchaya, compendium of practices or compendium of training, and his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And these two texts are seen as presenting primarily the Bodhisattva's deeds, the Bodhisattva's practices. So Potowa's lineage that emphasizes the understanding and practice of Atisha's teaching on the basis of the study of these texts are referred to as the lineage of the Great Treatises. And then another lineage that evolved where the Atisha students primarily their approach was to ground their explanations on a lamrim or tenrim stages of the presentation or stages of the doctrine approach, and this was referred to as the lineage of stages of the path or lineage of lamrim. And then they also evolved a third lineage, which was referred to as the lineage of the personal instructions, where the emphasis was more on small personal instruction text that are relevant to specific individual context and so on. So similarly, when you approach the practice of lamrim and lamrim teaching, even following Tsongkhapa's lamrim chemo, we can find all of these three lineages present. Tsongkhapa himself received all of the teachings of these three lineages, and for example, if you look at the Great Treatise itself, the basis and much of the supporting kind of sutras and the classical text really have to do with the Parchin literature, the perfection of wisdom literature. And in fact, in Gyaltsabje's text on perfection of wisdom, he every now and then actually refers to Lamrim Chemo, so showing the close connection between the two. So if you study Lamrim Chemo on the basis of these supporting texts, then you are primarily following the approach of the Kadam lineage of treatises, but you can also follow the Lamrim practice by kind of concentrating more on the actual Lamrim genre of text itself. For example, generally there are many different versions of Lamrim texts. For example, there is the famous collection of 8 great guides to Lamrim, Tichen Ge, and there are also many other texts. So if you follow that approach, then you are following primarily the approach of the lineage of Lamrim masters. However, there are also other shorter texts where again focuses more specifically on a small set of instructions, and if your approach follows that pattern, then you are following the lineage of the personal instructions. So you can see that even in the context of Lamrim study and practice, one can follow all these three different lineages of the Kadampas.
조지 펜네 되는 표 강진기 아로 사기건이 참으로 다 람림 치란디 찍고래샤 군지 롱진베 심닝에서 람림 나시리 다가는 신기 최저 사변기 투보 공세 람림도 로중 뒤되지 차상이야 람림 차상지로샤 되네 거주기 타불라지 냐면 타불라지 아니 탈게 타바름 시게 되다 지금 로도 넘시 그림 송다 첨부첨부다 라면다시마도 신도나 지부지고래서 되지
So
after 강정이 좀 싸게 거니 리스마저 참을로 로도 넘시 쓰네면도 제가 로정에 전부도 지고래서 단단 지고래서
Following Atisha's arrival in Tibet and his composition of the Lamrim root text, the pattern of the Lamrim structure and the presentation of the Lamrim teachings has been adopted in all the four principal schools of Tibetan Buddhism. For example, if you look at Master Longchenpa's text, Mind at Ease, Semying Elso, again, the presentation of the path in that text follows the basic pattern of Atisha's Lamrim approach. Similarly, if you look at Sakya Pandita's clear elucidation of the Buddha's intent, Tuba Gongsel, again the text is very clearly following Atisha's structure. In fact, Tuba Gongsel, this Sapiens text can be seen as providing a kind of a fusion of Lamrim, stages of the path approach teachings with the Lojong mind training teachings. Similarly, in the Kagyu tradition, Gampopa composed the jewel ornament of liberation. So in the jewel ornament of liberation, again, the basic approach and the pattern and the structure is very similar to Atisha's Lamrim. Of course, there are sometimes different sequences are adopted, but basically the stages of the path are very similar. So for example, in the jewel ornament of liberation, one speaks of turning one's mind away from four facts. And if you look at these four turnings of mind, turning away of the mind, again, they are very similar to the Lamrim teachings.
다 디자와디 고불루기 우머리지 태어나리야 도나 산제기 최디 아니 먼저도야 당 내리도야 니콩 먼저 비춰야 말이지 먼저도야디 사와매베 쳐라다네 먼저도고레스 내리도야디 아니 대권한이 시베타네 내리도고레스 어디 추주 딩일 먼저 야 말이지 디소인 말이
So
당내리 랑든도 랑든 지구 다 랑이 지구 다 내리 두야 차는 소소 탈바 사야지 차니 노다직 다 탈바 랑 지구 쳐도 뭐 이거 아니 타협의 심정 쳐도 이 내리 두야 지차인도 자네 삼바 심지 심바다 거버디 베다 되게 이게 달이야 타연도 라고는 송사 딘디지기다 진인되네 딘디지 dum인되네 엔다 타버도야지 내리도야 차용인도 자네 아들 장죽성 고비하래 전에 와다 가당 먼저 쪽이야다 내리도야 니고는 문제 왜다 쳐야 말이야 산지의 최 용서보다 니고도 그래 전에 당 먼저 쪽이야데 존재기 땡중 통해관에 존재기 교전제비 출了台湾내리 줘야돼 때는다고 땡중 대권하니 시에 타네 땡진 아니 땡진이 뭐 있냐고 제베 타네 당 내리 줘야 같은 소리 그래 저도 들리는데 너는 타다 싫었고 신 먼저 줘야돼 타봐 내리 줘야돼 싫어 그래서
even if you look at, even in the case of Atisha's own teachings, again, they can be traced back to Nagarjuna's point, where Nagarjuna in his precious garland explains that if you examine all the teachings of the Buddha can be classified into two categories related to two aspirations. One aspiration is to attain a fortunate rebirth in a higher realm, and the other aspiration is to attain ultimate liberation or definite goodness, as he calls it. So all the teachings of the Buddha, in one way or another, are related to these fulfillment of these two aspirations. And so then how do we attain the fulfillment of our aspiration for better rebirth? And this is done through adopting a way of life that is non-harming, non-violent. And the heart of that practice is what he calls the approach of living one's life on the basis of having a trust and confidence in the law of karma. So the cultivation of a confidence and faith in the law of karma and living one's life according to that conviction is the primary method by which one seeks to fulfill the aspiration to gain a fortunate rebirth. And the other aspiration is to seek final enlightenment or liberation. And here, the primary method is to cultivate an understanding of the ultimate nature of reality. And here, ultimate nature of reality understood primarily in terms of Buddha's teaching on dependent origination in terms of emptiness. And here, one needs to cultivate wisdom. So in other words, he says that in brief, the two primary factors that one needs to cultivate and apply in the context of the Buddhist practice are faith or conviction on karma, law of karma, and wisdom of emptiness. And when we talk about attainment of final liberation, there can be two forms. One is liberation of the individual, liberation from unenlightened existence. But there is also a liberation, attainment of Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So earlier, when commenting on Tsongkhapa's opening verse, he identified the primary quality of the Buddha's speech as having the ability to fulfill the aspirations of all beings. So this is the aim of the Mahayana practitioner. The Mahayana practitioner's motivation is to bring about benefit of all beings, and the Mahayana practitioner's aim is to attain Buddhahood for that sake. So motivated by that, one needs to therefore complement the path of wisdom with the bodhicitta, awakening mind. In that way, one then will be able to bring about the realization of that final aspiration. So therefore, Nagarjuna says that in brief, the two primary factors in the Buddhist path are shraddha, faith or conviction or confidence in karma, and wisdom.
어디 가면 중주야 숭당 드리직도 디베지 야르도 계좀 대외 솜스 기럽다 솜니부디 대외 솜체 사견 띵징 중소송아 되기 다 사견 제외 솜 디야 럽주 다외 솜 럽주다 주주니부디 다외 솜
So with relation to the sixth text belonging to the cultivation of faith, shraddha or confidence, and Bodhisattva Bhumi, the Bodhisattva levels, and ornament of Mahayana Sutras, these two are related to collections on the Bodhisattva ideals and practices, and Shiksha Samuchaya, the compendium of training and the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, are seen as collections pertaining to the cultivation of the view of emptiness. And that's the alternative perspective which I personally find more helpful.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. Chukunsu modern is developed chawat and basa teacher.
So with that, we basically dealt with the outline that explains the greatness of the teaching itself by highlighting the authenticity of its origin and the sources. Now we'll be dealing with the next outline, which is in order to generate faith and conviction in the teaching, explanation of the greatness of the teaching itself.
The Treatise soon is done. Temple to game to talk with Chawa. So Sonia Digi Yigi and the Chushu Nande, Taiyan Roy Raw Gong Sung Shen, Taiyan Raw Sunduzane, come the Meva Taiwa, come the Meva Nasoba. Chang Ma Jigo Gizman the Che, come the Meva Nasoba, Ran the Jis Tumbe, any the Gasurbugi Raw Gong the Sung Sharina. Any Sambequane, Yachijum Wangi, Tebochijum. Da Shirugone, da Samba said Dumbe Chane, Dumbe Chane, any Dubachijum Butane, Tebochijum. shirab 다 띵서 야치 좀 쓰내면도 띵서를 쓰내면도 뒤차네 아니 좀 더시 자주 원을 선택해서 세상 와도 든지기 땀바 내가 롱 땀바 다 좋은 롱 땀바 롱 땀바 맨다맨다 도스 여대버 뒤에 그 태그태게 무슨간의 신배이나 지 강사 유 타대베 다 타대베 지를 송에서 다시 넘는 그 숭디들 때 기부 숨기 람직네 지수 가서 그 단도직을 냠는 시당 좀 디셈버지기 그 난가로 즉시 과바이나 담배 답변 택고 맨자가 송세버 디디 로스 딘데지 거라 딘시담바리 디냠네 쳐버리 로즈 챔브야 공말 교회 거라 딘시송어리 나디냠네 쳐버리 로 초도 교회 내가 거라 딘시송어리 디냠네 쳐버리 셴네 삼바자지 누바자지 좀 왕게 택배를 맨자 송세버 디디 강사지 단도지를 냠네 쳐야지 고도로 좋아도가 다가는 신기 시르부 차네 맨자지 송샤바 시르부 유 다외 남샤 맨자맨다 송샤바 디디 지브게 가바 좀전 시에 타네 다베나 베나 강사가 담에 라본로 지 최지 담에 라본로 차샤베기나 디 다 터도도 돼요 말이 이내 베나 가란지 줄이야 지 가서 우리 그게 최 된두도 준비 된진 생기 되게 돌아다네 지 치료 전도 들어지 다 가서 우리 그게 다 민가다네 마다네 간다 수저로서 최디디 그러 tanking 뭐네 이게 지금 게 알아라 데이터라 런진 똑배 신시 tanking 뭐네 들어지 로 차도是吧그 현지라는 말이 돼. 그 진주도 현지라는 의미인데 간다 전에 지금 로를 차차로 그러다. 자다변 딩과야 되디. 거라 배 개월 통과. 개월에도 봐. 공가서 로를 차다면다 의미가 있잖아요. 변은 뜻이랑 지 로리야. 로 현지를 당신 현지 처리도 된 말이 돼. 이내 나한테 로를 확하려 지금 딱고 지고 랑겨로 로를 샤이도 봐. 자꾸 펜슬这里的意思在呢，강사 지， 다 지금 당신 차라 뭔가有意思在呢，但是对手里啊，다 가서 그래, 양년도 70 네 대고도, 담보탐지 주실 남기 70 저 송샤티.
So, one of the first qualities of the teaching itself that is identified here is that with the Adisha's teaching on Lamrim, one of the benefits of this is that an individual practitioner on the basis of this will then be able to come to the realization that among all the teachings of the Buddha there are no contradictions. So and the point being made here is that earlier when we talked about the quality of the Buddha's speech, Buddha's speech has this enlightened speech has the capacity to fulfill the diverse aspirations of countless numbers of beings. So when we are talking about limitless numbers of beings, we are not talking only in terms of numbers, we're also talking in terms of the diversity of mental dispositions of individuals. So with respect to the diversity of the mental dispositions and interest and mental levels of his audience, Buddha has also taught different teachings. So on the basis of depending upon the level of one's aspiration, one can make distinctions between greater and lesser vehicle, and on the basis of one's mental levels, with relation to the understanding of the teaching on wisdom, one can make distinctions between the 4 classical Buddhist schools of India. So now if you look at these teachings, they seem, if you simply try to understand these teachings at the level of individual text on the surface themselves and then compare them against others, they may seem to be a kind of a contradiction between different teachings. However, if you have the perspective of Atisha's Lamrim, then one will be able to understand these diversity of teachings, not only in relation to teachings that are suited to different individuals who are different from each other, but one can also understand these diverse teachings in the context of a single practitioner, where all of these different teachings can be applied by a single practitioner progressively as he or she moves in his or her realization. So, for example, with relation to the teachings on wisdom, there are different levels of subtlety of teaching on no-self. Similarly, there is the teaching on the rejection of the reality of the external objective world of the mind-only school. Now, if we relate these teachings to our own states of mind and the way in which we perceive the world, we can see why some of these teachings can be highly effective in our own case at given states of our realization. For example, if we were to observe our own mind and see how it relates to our own identity, we may sometimes see our own identity as possessing some kind of unitary, eternal, autonomous reality within us that we call self or soul, or whatever. And so we can see that we have that kind of grasping, and the Buddha's teaching that negates that can be immediately applicable for us to dissolve that kind of grasping. Similarly, if we examine the way in which we relate to the external world, we tend to relate to external world as if the physical world that is out there possesses some kind of independent reality of its own, that is independent of my perception, and has some kind of discrete reality. And again, the Buddha's teaching on mind only can be beneficial in helping us dissolve that kind of grasping. So we can see that although some of these teachings may seem contradictory on the surface, but if you relate them to the context of an individual who is progressively going through his or her realization and dealing with the various distortions in the mind, one can see that all of these teachings can be applicable in the context of a single individual without any contradiction. So this is one of the benefits of Atisha's teaching.
다바르기면도 수능을 담아서 잘 쳐왔다. 다디 조조 디나를 러브치면 디수도와 지금 세제체다. 두제체사르다. 두냐면 제가 최사르지가 지금 캐바 지금 남주쟁이지다. 숭당을 보야. 지금 조조체다. 배셔서 카니서 통해. 캐바 정도지야를 숭숭이 고르지. 왜냐면 다 지금 가서 자제를 변해진 이 공부하는 것이지. 어다 까 공제 다다 까단주랑了지 세제学的 냠내차 최신你有什么这样的的能知识这到他这些个熊呢到看到就각 공제 용서로 되게人均 뒤야 된다라 참을로다 그게 자유의 것이 어다 디니 시고리 디시토리 직체 다 될 때네 아니 대학고만 달라도 녀토야 대학고마다 조원 되기 싫은 것이 뭔도 줘야 더 마상으로 시대야지 다 내리 줘야 더 마상으로 시대를 주는 대학고만 달라도 녀토다 디운도 전에 아니 최봉을 내게 줘야지 다 될래야 돼 안다 점시 놈도 잘 것도 와 디 리뷰주지만 먹고 거야라 소시시니 뭐도 된게 다 가서 디 지치한다 시지수 나라라 아니 남탐지 깨버지 남탐지 셰버자 남지 차와야 차라 좀 송대야 디콩지차 시진기다 가서 그게 Gongzhe, and in Mondogang, Nalia, Dollar, Pember Channel, Lamshi, Jident to Zabakan, Senator Sundea, or Dinu Jimsi Tranche, Sundua. Such a day is an any Kasurbe Tire and Draver, Onyachi. Ria, Sosumone Chashanaya, Shungi Samolo, Shikogares, Tongagares. The day in do, as a pearl consensus on the Chashana, Nar Gay, the Kiduni, the Kibutaba Monguchi, the Rimi Nanche, Sagakani Risumacha, Sagakani Chonandacha, Risumache, and Tamba, Kasu Sansam. And Chen Nanche, Nantea, that they pay
So then Tsongkhapa goes on to explain some of the other benefits of Lamrim teaching, one of which is then he says that on that basis one will be able to then understand all the teachings of the Buddha as personal instruction. And here the principal point Tsongkhapa is making is that it would be a mistake if someone were to adopt the perspective that within the teachings of the Buddha, whether it is in the canonical text, the Kangyul, or the sutras, or the commentarial collections, if one adopts the perspective that there might be two fundamental categories, one class of texts that are really relevant only for expanding one's knowledge and more of a scholastic studies, and another category of teachings that are relevant for one's own personal practice. Tsongkhapa says that adopting that kind of a dichotomy between scholastic texts that are not relevant to one's practice and practice text that has nothing to do with expanding on one's knowledge, that kind of dichotomy is unhelpful. And if you are able to adopt the perspective of Lamrim teachings, as Atisha suggested, then one will be able to understand that all the teachings of the Buddha they will be elements that are relevant to one's own practice. And in fact, all of these teachings will have a direct relevance to one's own personal practice, so that one sees all of these in terms of personal instruction, because there is nothing in the teachings of the Buddha that are not related in one way or another to the disciplining and taming of one's mind and heart. So in this way, one can see all the teachings of the Buddha as personal instructions. Once you are able to do that, then the next greatness that he identifies with the teaching is then one will be able to understand easily, without difficulty, the ultimate intention of the Buddha's teachings. And here, as explained before, the ultimate intentions of the Buddha's teachings are the means to bring about the fulfillment of our aspiration to attain higher fortunate birth and attain a final liberation. So one will be able to understand all the teachings as contributing towards, in one way or another, to the fulfillment of these aspirations. And then the final greatness that he identifies is that one will then be saved from the grave error of rejecting the Buddha's teachings, rejecting Dharma. And here Tsongkhapa gives a lot of reasoning, but also he cites a lot of quotations from the Buddha's teachings, and particularly explains that cites from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, where Buddha states that for a Bodhisattva practitioner, he or she must cultivate the understanding of all the aspects of the path, must actually generate all the aspects of the path within, and must then engage in the actual application of all the aspects of the path. And similarly, because one's aspiration is to help bring about the realization of the wishes of myriads of sentient beings with such diverse mental dispositions, one must cultivate the understanding of the diverse teachings and diverse approaches, and in this way one will be able to fulfill the aspirations of others as well. And historically, in Tibet, for example, there has been, among the Tibetan masters, a tradition of masters engaging in the study and the practice of all the lineages, Sakya, Kagyu, Giluk, Nyingma, including Chonang as well, and adopting a non-sectarian approach and not only engaging all of the study of all of this, but also implementing in one's practice all the teachings of these various lineages as well, which is an excellent model. Yeah.
So, now stop. So after a long flight, India to London, London now here. Okay. Now I'm looking forward long sleep tonight. Thank you.